is a rare occasion indeed. With this bill, I bring you the opportunity to save your children and grandchildren and my children and grandchildren billions and billions of dollars of money being borrowed against them from the federal government. This bill is relatively simple. It would provide that no insurance company doing business in this state shall be authorized to sell health insurance on a federally run health insurance exchange in this state. Thank you. The purpose being, the federal government under Obamacare set up a requirement that states either set up their own health insurance exchange or the federal government was going to do it for them. We very clearly and adamantly asserted a few months ago that we think exchanges are a bad idea. We think this whole process is a bad idea, and we're not going to set one up as a state, deferring to the federal government. The federal government right now, it's my understanding from what the law says at the federal level, is in the process of creating a federal exchange in which they will sell health insurance over the internet to people in Tennessee. They will subsidize that by borrowing money from our children to the tune of billions and billions of dollars, and subsidize that, taking business away from our small insurance agents across the state who sell personal health insurance, and will attempt to sell these on an unproven system that companies and the government is scrambling to get set up by the October 1st deadline. This is a dangerous situation that we put potentially hundreds of thousands of Tennessee citizens in, to be forced into buying these policies through this exchange when they have an agent in every town. Every city across this state has an insurance agent that can facilitate selling those individuals a health insurance policy if they choose to buy it. Generally, when the federal government sets up a program or takes over something, they do what's called preemption. They preempt the field. An example would be our airways. The federal government has preempted our federal airways. They control through the FAA who can fly, where they can fly, how that operates. That's called preemption. The Achilles heel for Obamacare and the exchanges is that the federal government did not fully preempt health insurance. They could have. They could have said, we're going to take over health insurance in the entirety, we're going to regulate it as we see fit, and we're going to sell all these policies on the exchange. They didn't do that. It's my opinion they didn't do it because they couldn't get it passed that way, because you've got a small army of lobbyists representing insurance companies in every state in this country, that in each state has their own insurance regulations. They didn't want to fight that. They didn't want to mess with it. But therein lies the ability for us to continue to regulate insurance companies as we see fit. This bill will place a simple regulation on our state insurance companies that they cannot sell on these exchanges. They continue to do business just exactly like they do right now. But this is the Achilles heel of the Affordable Health Care Act, or Obamacare, whichever you want to call it. This is the ability for us to save our children and our grandchildren billions and billions of dollars that the federal government is going to borrow from them if we don't stop it. These are not federal dollars that will be spent somewhere else. This will stop the bleeding. And it's my belief, if we go ahead and pass this legislation, that there will be a number of states across the country that do the same thing. With that, and in the interest of my kids and yours, I would request that you pass this bill on the full committee. With the amendment, there is an amendment that's distributed, drafting code 4037. I don't think we've adopted that yet. It just changes, its technical amendment changes the words insurance company to entity, just to make sure that it covers all types of policies that could be sold on a health insurance exchange.
We have before us a motion and a second on the amendment. Any questions of the sponsor on the amendment? Hearing none, all those in favor vote aye. Aye. All those opposed? We are back on the bill, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know this is a somewhat contentious issue. I would request when we get to a vote on the bill itself that be a roll call vote, please.
Okay, we're back on the bill. I see a question. Speaker Johnson.
Representative Dennis, so this would, if I understand it correctly, insurance companies that are located within our state boundaries would not be able to participate in an exchange?
Well, no insurance company that is licensed to sell insurance in Tennessee, if this bill passes, would be able to sell health insurance in Tennessee through a federally created exchange.
What about insurance companies that were located outside the state? Of course, we don't have any control over that.
in order for them to sell health insurance in Tennessee, even with the Affordable Care Act, any entity selling health insurance in Tennessee has to be licensed by the state of Tennessee to sell health insurance.
Okay. So what about Farm Bureau? They would not be able to participate?
I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, but in my discussions with Farm Bureau will not be selling policies on a federally created exchange. They're not going to be operating on it. That's another reason I'm not a fan of this. It's the reason I'm a fan of this bill is because we have Farm Bureau agents scattered out across this state. They don't sell a lot of personal health insurance, but they do sell some, and this is going to take business away from them and put those citizens into the federal bureaucracy that is going to become if this exchange goes into implementation.
And I think that you're well aware that most of the people on this committee are not big fans of the Affordable Care Act, but having said that, we don't want to penalize insurance companies that do business inside the state. So that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
And I certainly would agree with that. I don't want to penalize those companies at all. I want them to continue to be able to do business just exactly like they do right now, and this bill would not prohibit that in any way. What it would prohibit is the federal government from taking billions of dollars from our children and subsidizing and making a gift, basically, to those insurance companies of our children's future.
Representative Favors.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Dennis, the very children that I expressed concern about and commended you, these are the children who, if they had access to affordable care and health insurance exchanges, this would help to correct some of that. And that was the purpose of this Affordable Care Act, because there were close to 50 million people without insurance coverage. Many of the insurance companies had direct input into developing this plan. And Mr. Chairman, I see someone from Blue Cross and Blue Shield, and I would like to ask to go out of session and just ask what they think about this bill, because there again, we just finished with the previous bill, not the previous one, but the bill from our Representative Womack that addressed an issue with us causing 60-something companies to go out of business. The insurance industry is tremendous in Tennessee, and I would certainly be adamantly opposed to doing something like this. So may we, sir, go out of session just a few minutes and allow someone from Blue Cross or any other insurance company to answer any questions that we may have as to the impact of the insurance company.
We will honor that request. Anyone seeking to speak on this, please come forward.
Thank you.
We are now in recess.
Thank you, Representative Favors. David Locke, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Tennessee. Our position, I think that Representative Johnson sort of expressed it. I mean, we understand the feelings of many about the Accountable Care Act, but at the same time, I feel like this sort of punishes us, because it is the federal law, it is the law of the land, and everybody's got to move past that. And we intend on, and we have worked for the past several years in developing products and plans to put on the exchange and sell, so that there is an option. There's no requirement for anybody to buy on the exchange, but there's an option for folks to go to the exchange and look and see if they want to buy one of these products and receive, if they're eligible, the subsidy that is there for those products on the exchange. We feel it's our mission to be on the exchange. To have, there's not one area, there's not one segment of the health insurance market where we do not participate and have products. And so we've spent a lot of time and energy and money, and have the workforce, as I think you've mentioned, to do that. And this concerns us. It'd be very frustrating for us to have to slam the brakes and go back and not give Tennesseans the option to purchase a product on the exchange and have the access to that tax subsidy.
Chairman Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Quick question for you. Does your company currently sell any products, insurance products, on the Internet?
On the Internet? No, not that I'm aware of. I mean, you can go to the Internet and get information on our products. I don't. Oh, Medicare plans, yes.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Don't you leave me. This is the expert,
DeKasha Winton, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee. Yes, and then a person can go online and purchase an insurance policy from Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee if they choose to do so. However, most people in Tennessee choose to utilize an agent or a broker so that they can assist them, because insurance is complicated. So they use an insurance or broker typically, and then if they choose to go online, they can do so.
Has the state of Tennessee issued a particular kind of license to allow Internet sales, or is that restricted to just within the borders of Tennessee? How does that work?
I don't think I understand the question. Can you ask it again?
As I understand the licensing procedure now, the entities that are licensed to sell insurance in Tennessee must have a body, if you will, a presence, a nexus, whatever you want to call it, within the state of Tennessee, and the purchase must occur within the state of Tennessee. Am I correct?
No, you don't have to necessarily. If you purchase, typically how it works, because we have state plans that have individuals that are outside of the state. But typically the main policy is purchased inside of the state of Tennessee. So if you're going to have a policyholder, that policyholder typically is going to be in Tennessee for us to write that coverage. But if someone, let's say one of our large employers has someone outside of the state, then they would still have Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee coverage, but the entire policy, the big breadth of the policy is in Tennessee.
Do those people that are being covered outside of the state of Tennessee have the option to buy that policy on the Internet?
I don't think I'm understanding what, I mean, are you asking if somebody comes to Blue Cross Blue Shield, if they go on bcbst.com and they live in California, right?
Yes.
And then they say, I would like to purchase a Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee policy, but I live in California. Is that where we're going?
Yes.
And so you're asking whether or not they can purchase that policy.
Correct.
The answer is yes. However, their benefits are here in Tennessee. Their doctors are here in Tennessee. Our network is here in Tennessee. So it is possible, but it's not practical.
Does the state of Tennessee currently regulate that Internet purchase?
The state of Tennessee regulates everything that we do currently. I mean, any policy that is sold, we have to file it with the Tennessee Department of Commerce and Insurance. And that policy has to be approved and signed off on by that department.
Other questions? Am I monopolizing the time here? Okay, I'll defer.
Okay. Okay.
Then I do have
Go ahead, Chairman.
All right. Sorry, I was going to allow my colleagues here to have a shot at you, but I do want to finish up.
Okay.
Figure of speech.
Okay.
I just want to make sure that I fully understand here that the state of Tennessee is allowing entities from outside the state of Tennessee to potentially purchase insurance policies over the Internet with companies domiciled and or licensed within Tennessee.
Yes, it is, like I said, it's a potential, but the fact that why would anyone, it wouldn't be practical for anyone to do that, because every insurance carrier has to have a network in Tennessee. We talk a lot about providers and where those providers are. We have to meet network adequacy standards. We have to have contracts with the doctors here. So our doctors that we have, our contracts are with licensed physicians in Tennessee. So those, we wouldn't go to Kentucky or Arkansas to have a contract with a doctor in Kentucky or Arkansas or California or wherever else.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
If there are other questions.
Oh, Chairman Keesley.
Thank you for relinquishing there, Representative Reagan, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. But for a company to do business in Tennessee, I mean, they could be in California, but they would have to be approved by the Department of Insurance.
That is correct. Any company that is operating in the state of Tennessee has to have a license in the state of Tennessee, which means they have to meet the network adequacy requirements, they have to meet the financial requirements.
There's criteria,
yes,
correct.
there are tons of criteria, and on top of that, each company submits financial information annually, quarterly and annually, to let the Tennessee Department know exactly what they're doing.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we have another individual who would like to speak.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, David Bromell, on behalf of the America's Health Insurance Plans. Blue Cross is a member, and a lot of other large insurers. Let me echo, and I agree with Mr. Locke's statement, but I wanted to point out a potential problem this legislation could create. As you know, the governor declined to have a state-sponsored exchange, so the federal government is running our exchange. And the federal government, before you can sell on the exchange, you have to be what's called a qualified health plan. The HHS will qualify the health plans. I believe a real possibility exists that if Tennessee companies are prohibited, the federal government is simply going to allow other companies to sell, because they're not going to let us bypass Obamacare in the state of Tennessee. I don't believe that will happen. So you could put Tennessee companies at a real disadvantage.
Chairman Reagan.
Okay, if I understood you correctly, should this legislation pass and we prohibit Tennessee companies from prohibiting in that, you're telling me that the federal government is going to take away our right to regulate the sale of insurance to Tennesseans within the Tennessee borders. Is that correct?
They've already done that on the exchanges. Now, that's all we're talking about in this legislation, as I understand it, on the exchange. Federal law has dictated the rules to play on the exchange.
Then why would we have to agree to participate in an exchange?
You don't have to. The governor decided not to, and when you decided not to participate in the exchange, federal law said the HHS will come in and set the rules to dictate the exchange.
As I understood the sponsor earlier, though, the doctrine of preemption was not exercised here. So the state of Tennessee, because the federal government hasn't taken over our right to regulate insurance, still has that right, regardless of the existence of this exchange or not. Is that correct?
I don't know about that, Representative, but I believe there would be no preemption argument. What would simply happen will be CMS, HHS will come in and allow qualified health plans under their jurisdiction to sell on the exchange.
So in other words, they would allow companies that we haven't allowed to sell in Tennessee, so they're violating our right to regulate.
That'd be correct, yeah. And they've taken away a lot of our latitude and jurisdiction in Obamacare. That's already happened.
Mr. Chairman, do we have someone from the Department of Insurance to speak to that? If there are no, first I want to preempt my colleagues' questions.
Any questions? We're going to have a representative from the department come forward. I will remind you we are asked to relinquish the room at 5, and we're going to try our best to get there, but please ask any questions you choose.
Hello, my name is Tony Greer, and I'm Chief Counsel for the Department of Commerce and Insurance, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, my question that I just posed to that gentleman, does the existence of this federal health care exchange, if it comes into play, preempt the state of Tennessee, should we pass this legislation, from regulating the sale of insurance within our own borders?
The Affordable Care Act has very broad preemption powers within it, and the Affordable Care Act can basically preempt any state law that operates contrary to the Affordable Care Act. It doesn't specify which laws are going to be preempted. The preemptions in the Affordable Care Act work similar to the HIPAA preemptions. So any state law that works contrary to the ACA, the federal government can come in and preempt. So any law that would prohibit any company licensed in Tennessee from selling on the exchange would run counter to the ACA's provision that sets up the federal exchange, since Tennessee opted not to, and would likely be preempted.
Is that encoded in that law, or is that something that would be settled in a...
It is encoded in the ACA. There are several broad preemptive provisions in several different places within the ACA.
Okay, so basically what if I understand you correctly, you're saying that Tennessee's right to regulate insurance no longer exists, period.
We do retain some control, and the control we retain, we still retain the right to review the forms and rates for insurance companies on the exchange and off the exchange. But since we didn't set up our own exchange, the exchange policies, the rates and forms, also have to be reviewed by the federal government. But before a company can sell on the exchange, those forms and rates have to be approved in Tennessee, as well as approved by the federal government. If Tennessee doesn't approve the rates and forms, then the federal government will not approve those rates and forms for sale on the exchange by a qualified health plan.
Okay, that sounds counter to what you just said before that. If Tennessee can approve those things or not approve them, as the case may be,
correct,
then all we have to do is pass this legislation, and we are not approving those forms and rates.
If this passes, it would prohibit any company from participating on the exchange, any company that's licensed here, which means it would effectively run counter to the ACA's provision that establishes a federal exchange in Tennessee. And when that happens, it's not a matter of the department approving rates and forms or not. It's a matter of just trying to nullify the exchange provision of the ACA. And something that broad, at this point, I believe, would be preempted. Now, the rates and forms we review, that's on a case-by-case basis, and the rates have to be actuarially justified, and the policies have to have all the Tennessee mandates, and it has to meet the federal essential health care benefit benchmarks that Tennessee opted not to choose, but were picked by the federal government under the default option that was specified in HHS regulations. So if a policy form, if the rate is not actuarially justified, or if it doesn't meet the policy form provisions, then we have the right to reject that and say, you know, this policy is not adequate, it doesn't meet the law, and we're not going to approve it. And at that point, the federal government could not approve it either. But if you go in such a broad sweep and say that no company can sell on the exchange, period, that's a little too broad, I think.
We haven't said that no company, as I understand the legislation, and I'm certainly willing to be corrected on that. What we said is any company that's licensed in Tennessee.
Right, and if you prohibit any company that's licensed in Tennessee, I don't know what the federal government would do at that point. There are hundreds and hundreds of companies in the U.S. that are not licensed in Tennessee right now. And what this could do is basically say that any company that's licensed in Tennessee couldn't sell on the exchange. So the feds could
They couldn't sell on the exchange to Tennesseans.
The feds could come in and say that since we've said no company licensed in Tennessee can sell on the exchange, they could preempt it. They could come in and say that any other company in the country that is a qualified health plan except Tennessee licensed companies could sell in Tennessee. If that's the case, then you'll have unlicensed companies. You could have unlicensed companies coming in to do business that would put our licensed companies at a disadvantage because they couldn't sell on the exchange. You could also see Tennessee companies surrender their licenses and become unlicensed entities and get qualified under the Federal Health Care Exchange, and we would lose control over those companies. And those companies that surrendered their licenses wouldn't be able to sell off the exchange if they surrendered them.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I would like the sponsor to address that when he takes it back.
Okay, any further questions to our speaker?
I'll just make a comment. This is really getting interesting when it comes to these exchanges because, you know, the Cato Institute, even last week, still maintain that these health insurance exchanges, they got a real problem going forward. And the problem going forward is they said they actually read, they read the law, the thousands of pages. And what they said was that if the way the law is written, if the federal government, if the state creates their own exchange, the federal government will then provide the subsidy, which is the premise to Obamacare, affordable health care. But if the federal government has to step in and create the own exchange, e.g. Tennessee, they have no funding mechanism to do so. So, I mean, there are people out there that still say, good luck with these exchanges. This is just one more.
Right. And to that end, the IRS has promulgated regulations that state if a federal exchange is created, the people who purchase through the federal exchange still get the subsidy. Now, the subsidy language in the ACA specifically refers to the state-run exchange, but the IRS has expanded that to include the federally run exchanges, and that hasn't been tested yet. That regulation has been passed, it's in effect, but it hasn't. I don't believe it's right for a court challenge yet to determine that, but until that point, that regulation does stand.
But this would just be one more blockade in that attempt. Okay, thank you.
Okay, we have one other speaker who'd like to come forward quickly, please.
Mr. Chairman, Mandy Young on behalf of Cigna. And to the line of these questions, I understand the intent of the sponsor. Connecticut General, a Cigna-based company, has licensed entities in every other state. So I'm a little confused because if he's trying to prevent Connecticut General from selling because it has a Tennessee licensed company, I have also a Kentucky licensed company. I have a Connecticut-based licensed company. Cigna may still well be able to sell on that exchange to Tennessee residents, based on that conversation we just had with the representative from the Department of Commerce and Insurance. So although Representative Dennis is trying to stop the exchange, and I understand the opinions about Obamacare from this committee, you may very well only be stopping your own Tennessee-based companies, because I think Cigna may still be able to sell on the exchange from its other based companies, not just its Tennessee licensed company. So I think you're well-intentioned in it, but you may be punishing my competitor, Blue Cross Blue Shield, and any other only Tennessee-based company from selling on the exchange, which I know is not Representative Dennis's intent in the least. So I just point that out to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Questions for the speaker? All right, we are back in session, and to the sponsor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not really sure where to start. As to the first issue I remember about Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee selling a health insurance policy to a California resident, I think the regulators for insurance in California would take issue with that, because we don't let California insurance companies sell insurance in Tennessee unless they are licensed to sell that policy in Tennessee. I don't think California is any different than us in that regard, so I think the speaker may have been mistaken on that as to individual policies. As to the counsel for the department made a very good argument on behalf of the administration if they chose to challenge the legislation, and they might want to hire him for that if this bill passes and they choose to try to challenge it, because I read the preemption language in Obamacare very, very differently, and I'll be glad to get that language to you, members, if you would like to see it. In my view, in my reading as an officer of the court, the language is very restrictive. It authorizes the federal government to set up an exchange, but it leaves regulation of the insurance companies in that state and the insurance companies that are selling on that exchange up to the states individually and specifically. That's the way I read it. I'm open to be proven correct, but nobody's brought me any language to the contrary thus far, and this bill's been on notice for several months. The way I read it as a lawyer, we have absolute authority to regulate those insurance companies that are selling on the exchange. The federal government can build a flea market, but they can't make people go and sell insurance there, or sell something at that market. And it is my position and opinion, and I hope if this turns out to be incorrect and the federal government tries to do something different, that we challenge it with utmost authority. I don't believe that anything in Obamacare allows an out-of-state company, a company that's not licensed to do business in this state, to sell insurance to Tennessee residents through a Tennessee exchange. If they could, there'd be no reason for each state to have its own exchange. We'd have one federal exchange, and anybody could go and buy it anywhere. You can't do that. That's why we have 50 exchanges, is because each insurance company that's selling insurance on that exchange has to be licensed by the state, and that policy has to be approved by the state. You're not going to have Cigna from Utah coming in and selling insurance on the Tennessee exchange without the regulatory authority of the state of Tennessee. I could be proven wrong on that. If the witnesses have testified want to present to me and to all of you evidence to the contrary, let me know. But I tell you, I would not be standing here as a member of this body and as an officer of the court if I did not believe this was constitutionally and procedurally permissible and acceptable. Now, the feds might want to challenge it. If they do, they'll make that argument the administration made. Let them try. But as far as I'm concerned, we regulate the insurance companies in this state until the federal government completely preempts the industry, which they have the ability to do. But until they do, we need to regulate insurance companies as we see fit in Tennessee, and I hope you'll agree with me on that.
Further questions for the sponsor? Chairman Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Sponsor, first of all, full disclosure, I'm an insurance agent, but I see all the problems and ramifications of the ACA. I see we even had a hearing the other day when they were talking about Medicaid expansion, how they're going to pay for a lot of this, and part of it is going to be taxing plans that are already out there, taxing medical equipment, and they're looking at a 200 to 300% increase in policyholder premiums. That was by Commissioner McPeak when she testified the other day. That's what they're looking at. So it's nothing but a problem coming down the road. But I wanted to talk real quickly about, I know you've done a lot of research on this too. Let's talk about the U.S. Constitution and just exactly, we all know that the states created the U.S., the federal government, not the other way around. And the thing that I keep hearing about this is the supremacy clause. I don't think the supremacy clause really deals with this particular issue, because when you're looking at it, you're looking at parallel things that both the state and the federal government are trying to do when one of them's contradicting the other, and that's not what's happening right here at all. It's a fact that goes back to what you were talking about a while ago, that we have the right to regulate insurance companies within the state of Tennessee, and I appreciate you bringing this bill forward.
Further questions? As per his request, the speaker has asked, the sponsor rather, has asked that we have a roll call vote on this bill. Hearing no further questions, we will now depend on the clerk to call the roll.
Representative Favors. Representative Johnson. Representative Kiesling. Representative McManus. Representative Powers. Representative Reagan. Representative Shepard. Chairman Matlock.
Ayes 6, noes 2. Sponsor goes forward with the bill. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members, very much.
We're back to the calendar.